Beneath the warmth of our modern world lies a forgotten, frozen chapter of Earth's history. A time when the planet's rhythm slowed, when vast ice sheets armored entire continents, and when majestic creatures, now confined to legend, moved across a silent white landscape. The ground we walk on, the water we drink, even the resilience written into our genes were shaped in the stillness of that great winter. Tonight, we open the door to that distant age and begin a quiet journey into its memory. Wherever you are listening from, you are part of this exploration. For a moment, leave the noise of the outside world behind. Close your eyes and imagine stepping into a world of ice. Yet the first thing to understand is this: the Ice Age was not a single, endless freeze. It was more like the slow breathing of the planet itself. Extended glacial periods gave way to milder interglacial intervals in a steady rhythm. Earth's climate shifted back and forth over tens of thousands of years, influenced by subtle variations in its orbit, changes in axial tilt, and even the gentle wobble of its rotation, movements so slight yet powerful enough to reshape the world. Beneath the warmth of our modern world lies a forgotten landscape, a world shaped not by heat, but by silence. There was a time when the planet's pulse slowed, when massive ice sheets armored entire continents, and when creatures that now live only in imagination walked across frozen plains. The ground beneath your feet, the water you drink, even the ancient resilience written into your DNA, all of it traces back to that long winter. Tonight, we gently open the door to that forgotten age. Leave the noise of the present behind. Close your eyes and travel back, far back in time. The Ice Age was not a single, endless freeze. It was more like the earth breathing. Long glacial periods advanced, then retreated, giving way to warmer interludes. This rhythm stretched across tens of thousands of years, guided by subtle shifts in our planet's orbit, its axial tilt, and its slow celestial wobble. When sunlight slightly diminished, ice expanded. When it increased, the glaciers withdrew, and those small variations reshaped the entire planet. Oceans receded, land bridges emerged, entire ecosystems surged forward and collapsed again, like a planetary tide moving in slow motion. Now imagine standing somewhere in Northern Europe, North America, or Siberia. The horizon is not lined with cities or forests. Instead, a towering wall of ice stretches endlessly before you, hundreds of meters high. The air is sharp and dry. Each breath burns your throat. Your lungs fill with the heavy scent of snow. And yet, life persists. Across the frozen steppe, herds of woolly mammoths move slowly, their curved tusks dull and blade-like beneath the pale sky. Nearby, giant ground sloths lumber forward like walking hills, shaking the earth beneath them. In the tall grass, saber-toothed cats lie in absolute stillness, muscles coiled like springs, ivory fangs catching even the faintest flicker of light. Further south, where the crushing weight of ice never fully reached, forests continue to grow, rivers flow. These milder refuges become sanctuaries of survival. It is here that our ancestors adapt. They track vast herds. They sharpen stone spear tips. They gather around fire, sharing its fragile warmth. Humanity does not simply endure the cold. It is shaped by it. Endurance, patience, adaptation. These may be the oldest inheritances we still carry within us. The people who lived through it had no idea they were part of what we would one day call the Ice Age. For them, this was simply life. Cold winds, hunting, firelight. Nothing unusual. The extraordinary part is what we see when we look back, because the Earth was not a lifeless, frozen desert from pole to pole. While the northern hemisphere lay beneath immense shields of ice, the equatorial regions remained warm enough for rainforests to thrive and deserts to stretch across vast distances. The planet was divided into sharp contrasts: extreme cold in one region, resilient warmth in another. Life adapted. Species migrated. Some endured, others vanished. The Ice Age world was not just colder, it was harsher, more dramatic, defined by sharper boundaries. And this story began long before humans fully stepped onto the stage. Scientists pieced together this ancient narrative using ice cores extracted from deep within Antarctica and Greenland. These frozen columns are like time capsules. Each layer of compacted snow traps tiny bubbles of ancient air, preserving the atmosphere of the era in which it formed. Those microscopic bubbles reveal carbon dioxide levels, temperature shifts, even traces of volcanic eruptions from hundreds of thousands of years ago. And thanks to this frozen archive, we know something important. The Ice Age did not descend upon Earth overnight. It crept in quietly. Glaciers advanced slowly at first, then they paused, they retreated, and then they surged forward again, grinding mountains into dust, carving valleys, reshaping continents like a slow, relentless tide. This was not a sudden conquest. It was the patient, unstoppable transformation of a living planet. As the ice sheets expanded, they reshaped the land beneath them with relentless patience. They carved mountain peaks into sharp silhouettes. They deepened valleys. They hollowed out basins that would one day become lakes. Massive boulders were torn from their origins and carried hundreds of kilometers away, scattered like pebbles on a distant shore. Even today, in Canada, Scandinavia, and across northern North America, the marks remain. Polished rock surfaces, giant erratic stones resting far from their birthplace. Silent evidence of a slow but unstoppable force. But this was only the beginning. To understand how the cold gradually took hold of the planet is to unlock the doorway into this lost world. How did Earth's familiar rhythm begin to change? What set this vast transformation into motion? The answer was not a sudden catastrophe, not a falling star, not a cloud of gas rising from the crust. The cause was quieter than that, deeper, almost invisible. It was hidden in our planet's ancient dance through space. The cold did not descend overnight. It arrived in slow waves, so gradual that no single lifetime could perceive the shift. Yet across thousands of years, the accumulation of change became unstoppable. Now, it is time to understand the steps of that dance. Let us turn our attention to Earth's journey around the sun. We often imagine Earth's orbit around the sun as a perfect circle. In reality, it is anything but perfect. Over tens of thousands of years, our planet's path subtly shifts, stretching from nearly circular to slightly elliptical, then relaxing again. The change is gentle, almost imperceptible within a human lifetime. Yet it slightly alters the amount of solar energy Earth receives over the course of a year. On its own, this shift cannot freeze the planet. It is simply the opening note of a much larger symphony. The more decisive movement lies in Earth's tilt. Our planet does not stand upright in space. It leans. That tilt gives us the seasons. But even this angle is not fixed. Over roughly 41,000 years, it increases and decreases by a few degrees. When the tilt lessens, Earth stands a little straighter. The contrast between seasons softens, and summers in the northern hemisphere grow cooler, This is the crucial mechanism. Ice ages are not triggered by brutally cold winters. They begin with summers that are simply not warm enough. If summer cannot melt the snow left behind from winter, a little remains. The following year, more accumulates, then more again. Like an unpaid debt, layer upon layer builds up. Snow compresses, it hardens, it transforms into ice. And over thousands of years, that quiet accumulation becomes powerful enough to reshape continents. And finally, the third step of the dance, Earth's gentle wobble. Imagine a spinning top slowing down. In its final moments, it begins to sway, tracing small circles as it loses stability. Our planet moves in a similar way. Over a cycle of roughly 26,000 years, Earth slowly wobbles in space. This motion gradually shifts where the seasons occur along our orbit. It determines whether summer happens when we are slightly closer to the sun or slightly farther away. On its own, the change is imperceptible. No single human lifetime could notice it. But together, orbital shape, axial tilt, and wobble, these three movements rewrite the planet's climate in rhythms that span tens of thousands of years. Sometimes, the alignment is just right. The orbit becomes more circular, the tilt decreases, and the wobble places northern hemisphere summers at the point farthest from the sun. When that happens, summers remain cool for thousands of years, and the cycle begins again. Snow that falls in winter does not fully melt in summer. Fresh layers settle on top of what remains. Years turn into centuries, centuries into millennia. Under its own weight, the snow compresses. It densifies. It transforms. It is no longer snow. It becomes deep blue ice, immense, slow-moving, and powerful enough to reshape the world. The silent dance has become visible. This is how the cosmic dance first echoes across the earth, invisible, unfelt, unfolding in the silence of the stars. Yet these subtle celestial shifts begin to slow the heartbeat of the planet. Still, the sky provides only the initial touch. The true transformation begins when that faint signal of cooling reaches the surface and awakens the planet's own internal forces. Because once cooling takes hold, it becomes self-reinforcing. Earth's climate is a delicate conversation between interconnected systems, atmosphere, oceans, ice, land, and life itself. When one changes, the others respond. When that barely noticeable cooling began, this delicate balance shifted. A small drop in temperature triggered a reaction. That reaction triggered another, and soon a chain response was underway. Like the first small movement that releases an avalanche, what began as a subtle change became a process that fed upon itself. Each step amplified the next. Gradually, the planet drifted into a deeper and deeper sleep. And the first of these reactions was both the simplest and the most powerful. Ice acts as Earth's perfect mirror. Dark soils and deep oceans absorb sunlight, while pristine white snow and ice reflect it straight back into space. As summers in the north remained cool, the snow cover from the previous winter endured longer. This allowed the planet's vast white mirror to gradually expand. Every square kilometer of growing ice reflected more sunlight back into space. Less sunlight meant less heat, cooler summers, and more snow accumulation. More snow created more ice, and thus, over tens of thousands of years, an unstoppable, self-reinforcing cycle of cooling took hold. But ice was not the only player on this stage. The oceans, the planet's largest and slowest breathing entities, played a crucial role in this transformation. cold water behaves differently than warm water. As it cools, it absorbs carbon dioxide from the atmosphere more efficiently and carries it downward, storing it in the depths. As the planet gradually cooled, the oceans cooled with it, and in doing so, they assumed a powerful, invisible role. They began acting like a vast sponge, drawing carbon dioxide out of the air. Carbon dioxide functions like a thin blanket wrapped around the Earth. It traps a portion of the sun's heat, helping maintain a habitable surface. But when that blanket thins, warmth escapes more easily into space. As atmospheric carbon dioxide declined, the planet lost more heat. As the planet cooled further, the oceans cooled further, and colder oceans absorbed even more carbon dioxide. Another feedback loop had begun. Just as expanding ice reflected sunlight away, the deep breathing of the oceans reinforced the cooling from below. One force sent light back to space. The other removed heat-trapping gases from the sky. Together, they amplified the shift. At times, additional forces joined the stage. A massive volcanic eruption could inject millions of tons of ash and sulfur into the upper atmosphere, dimming sunlight for years. A temporary veil formed. The planet cooled further. Ocean currents, too, adjusted. Warm currents that once transported heat northward weakened or shifted. Regions that depended on this flow grew colder, as if the thermostat of the planet had been turned down. Over tens of thousands of years, these feedback systems layered upon one another. Small changes reinforced larger ones. The planet did not freeze in a single dramatic moment. It drifted, steadily and patiently, into deeper cold. Eventually, the planet settled into a frozen equilibrium, a world profoundly different from the one we know today. The stage was set. The slow, unstoppable giants of this new world, the glaciers, were ready to begin their long march across the land. The early cooling gradually transformed the snow that had accumulated for tens of thousands of years. This was not a simple freeze. It was a metamorphosis. Each fresh layer of snowfall pressed down on the older layers beneath it, compressed them, compacted them. The delicate spaces between snowflakes collapsed under centuries of weight. Air became trapped inside, sealed as tiny bubbles within the forming ice. Snow first turned into a dense, granular mass. Then it hardened further, heavier, stronger, until it became true glacial ice, deep blue, ancient in appearance, and hard as stone. It was no longer merely frozen water. It was time made solid, history compressed by pressure, a slow-moving force preparing to reshape the earth. This was now a patient giant, ready to move, and the giants began to grow. Across North America, the vast Laurentide ice sheet spread like a frozen ocean over what is now Canada and the northern United States. In some places, it exceeded 3 kilometers in thickness, massive enough to swallow even today's tallest mountains, as if they were mere hills. Across the Atlantic, the Fennoscandian ice sheet pressed down upon Scandinavia and northern Europe with similar weight. Yet these ice sheets were not static. Under their own immense mass, they began to flow, like rivers made of stone. The movement is difficult to imagine. Perhaps only a few centimeters a day, maybe a few meters, within a single human lifetime, almost imperceptible. But that slowness was deceptive. Billions of tons of ice, advancing without urgency, yet without pause, carried a force nothing on the surface could resist. As they moved, they scraped away everything beneath them. Forests were crushed, hills were erased, valleys deepened. Even mountains were worn down. The rocks trapped at the base of the glaciers acted like sandpaper, grinding against the bedrock, polishing it, carving deep grooves that still mark the landscape today. It was the largest and slowest act of sculpture ever performed on Earth, not shaped by sudden blows, but by relentless pressure over thousands of years. Glaciers did not only destroy, they carried, they shaped, they created. As they advanced, they did more than break apart the rocks in their path. They lifted enormous stone blocks and carried them silently across vast distances, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers. When the ice finally retreated, these massive travelers were left behind, standing alone in landscapes to which they did not belong. Unlike rivers, glaciers are never in a hurry. Rivers carve sharp V-shaped valleys. Ice moves differently, slowly, heavily, persistently. Where it passed, it carved wide floors and steep walls, forming majestic U-shaped valleys. The breathtaking fjords of the north and the dramatic alpine landscapes are the quiet signatures of this patient force. Many of the lakes scattered across the northern hemisphere are simply the footprints of vanished ice. Depressions once pressed down by glaciers later filled with meltwater, becoming still mirrors of the sky. Ice did not merely reshape the land, it quietly designed the future of entire continents. The Great Lakes of North America are among the most magnificent remnants of this transformation. Deep impressions left behind by an immense shield of ice. The weight of these glaciers is almost impossible to imagine, so heavy that the crust beneath them did not remain rigid. It bent, it yielded, it slowly sank, as if it were soft clay rather than solid rock. The planet's mantle curved inward under billions of tons of frozen mass, and when the ice began to melt, the pressure eased. But the recovery was never sudden. The land began to rise again, slowly, patiently, like a long, quiet breath. Even today, parts of Scandinavia and Canada continue to lift by mere millimeters each year. The Earth is still adjusting, still remembering the burden of the Ice Age. Yet these giants were not only reshaping land, they were frozen water borrowed from the oceans. As water became trapped in ice, sea levels fell, coastlines shifted, maps were redrawn in silence. The glaciers did not simply carve the land, they quietly altered the boundaries of the world. The planet's water cycle follows a simple and ancient balance. Water rises, condenses, and eventually returns to the sea. But the Ice Age slowed this rhythm. Water that evaporated under the sun formed clouds and fell as snow in northern latitudes no longer flowed back through rivers to the ocean. Instead, it became locked within vast ice sheets, frozen, suspended, removed from the cycle for thousands of years. It was a quiet withholding. With each drop trapped in ice, the ocean slowly retreated, meter by meter, decade by decade, until sea levels stood more than 100 meters lower than today. A withdrawal as deep as a 30-story building, not sudden, not violent, but gradual, like the slow advance of the ice itself. A coastal community living through a single lifetime might not have noticed. Yet across millennia, the seas stepped back. Shallow waters became marshes. Marshes dried into wind-swept plains. Bays turned into valleys. Islands connected to continents. And lands now separated by vast oceans were once close enough to cross on foot. The sea did not simply fall. It redrew the boundaries of the world. The continental shelves, usually hidden beneath the sea, now lay exposed. New lands stretched beneath the sun, shaped by wind and silence. Where the Bering Strait lies today, there was no narrow passage of water. Instead, a vast landmass extended across the horizon, Beringia. It was not merely a bridge, it was a world of its own. Rivers flowing, mammoths grazing, cold winds sweeping across open plains. An extension of the great Asian steppes. And at some quiet moment in prehistory, humans followed migrating herds across this frozen land, unaware they were crossing into an entirely new continent. For them, it was not a grand migration. It was simply survival. Yet those steps opened the final great chapter of humanity's global journey. The Americas were no longer unreachable. Europe, too, had its lost world. Beneath what is now the North Sea once lay Doggerland, a landscape of gentle hills and rivers. Britain was not yet an island. The Thames and the Rhine flowed across this plain before reaching the Atlantic. Farther south, islands merged. Sundaland formed a single landmass. Sahul connected Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. The planet was familiar, yet entirely different. Coastlines shifted, boundaries blurred. Maps, as we know them, did not yet exist. These newly revealed land corridors were not meant for humans alone. Animals moved across them. Plants spread quietly, seed by seed. Life followed the retreating seas into territories that had long been hidden beneath water. For a time, the world felt larger. But this expansion was never permanent. It was a fragile balance sustained only by the presence of ice. The oceans were holding a deep breath, and one day they would release it. As the glaciers began to melt, they returned what they had borrowed. Billions of tons of water flowed back into the seas, slowly, steadily. Sea levels began to rise. The water did not rush, but it did not stop. Plains once crossed by herds became marshes. Marshes turned into shallow coasts, and eventually into open sea. Beringia disappeared beneath the waves. Doggerland faded into silence. Other lost lands followed. What remained were faint traces in maps, and secrets resting on the ocean floor. The world grew smaller again, but it emerged transformed. Before the waters returned, the newly exposed lands began to change the sky itself. When the oceans withdrew, they did more than reveal coastlines. They exposed vast stretches of dry, barren ground, open to the wind. The Ice Age world was not only cold, it was restless. The immense ice sheets covering the Arctic chilled the air above them to extreme levels. The cold air grew dense and heavy, forming massive, persistent zones of high pressure. Meanwhile, near the equator, sunlight continued to warm the surface. Warm air rose, creating low-pressure regions. Nature follows its laws. Air moves from high pressure toward low pressure. Between the frozen poles and the heated tropics, enormous temperature differences powered relentless wind corridors. Storms that seem powerful today would have felt like gentle breezes in comparison. The wind did more than blow. It lifted soil. It carried dust across continents. It veiled the skies in fine drifting particles. The world was cold, but never still. These winds swept across the exposed and vulnerable land without rest. They lifted fine particles from the surface and carried them beyond the horizon. What were they carrying? The answer lay beneath the glaciers and behind the retreating seas. Glaciers were not only sculptors, they were grinders. For thousands of years, as they advanced, they crushed the bedrock beneath them under immense pressure. Stone fractured, shattered, and was reduced to a powder as fine as flour. This mineral dust accumulated along melting edges and within channels of glacial runoff. It is sometimes called glacial flour, yet its influence reached far beyond the ice. Meanwhile, the oceans had left behind vast continental shelves, dry, exposed, and covered with fine sediments, surfaces stripped of moisture, ready to be lifted by wind. When these two sources combined, the raw material of a new atmospheric force emerged. Glacial dust and dried marine sediments rose into the air, drifting across continents like a faint mineral veil. The Ice Age atmosphere was not only cold, it was filled with dust. The sky was no longer the clear blue we know today. Fine mineral dust, lifted by relentless winds, rose high into the atmosphere. A pale veil formed around the planet. The sun still shone, but its light was softened. No longer a sharp, radiant sphere, it appeared as a muted disk behind the haze. The horizon was never fully crisp. Distance dissolved into a faint curtain of drifting particles. This was not merely a change in scenery. The air itself felt different. When inhaled, it carried the subtle sensation of fine sand. Snow, once pure white, was stained with a yellowish tint as dust settled upon it. Storms brought more than ice and wind. They carried soil from distant lands. Each gust contained fragments of another continent. The world felt heavier. Visibility shortened. Light grew diffused and subdued. A cold planet, wrapped in a thin, persistent layer of dust. But the dust suspended in the sky could not remain there forever. After traveling thousands of kilometers, when the winds finally lost their strength, they gently released their mineral cargo back to the earth. A silent, patient, almost invisible process began. Over centuries, this fine sediment accumulated, slowly transforming into thick and extraordinarily fertile layers of soil. Scientists call these deposits loess, and within them lay the promise of future abundance. Today, the fertile plains of China, the agricultural heartlands of Central Europe, and the vast fields of North America stand upon the legacy of those ancient winds. The same relentless storms that once darkened the sky and made breathing difficult were, in truth, laying the foundation for cities yet to be built, civilizations yet to rise, and fields that would one day feed millions. The Ice Age was an era of contradictions, cold yet productive, harsh yet creative. The oceans had retreated, the winds refused to rest, and the atmosphere was wrapped in a pale veil of dust. Yet within these severe conditions, a new stage for life was being prepared. This world appeared wilder, sharper, more unforgiving than our own, and yet it was strangely generous. Across the wind-carved plains roamed thick-furred giants, while beneath the frozen soil, the fertility of the future quietly gathered strength. What seemed suffocating was, in fact, part of a long transformation. The dust that filled the sky was not merely a symbol of an age, it was a messenger of what was to come. And within all that chaos, the earth waited patiently for its next great change. As the winds sculpted the land and the dust settled into fertile ground, new figures began to dominate this frozen world. Across the vast steppes, stretched from Europe to Asia and into North America, herds of colossal creatures moved like living mountains. Among them walked the mighty woolly mammoth, its curved tusks arcing forward like crescent moons, its dense fur shielding it from the merciless cold. Beside it roam the powerful woolly rhinoceros and massive steppe bison, each perfectly adapted to this wind-swept kingdom of ice and grass. This was the Mammoth Steppe, a landscape that at first glance seemed barren, yet pulsed with life. And then, quietly, almost humbly, another presence appeared, not as large, not as strong, not protected by fur or towering horns, but carrying something far more powerful. Humans stepped onto this stage. Small bands moved cautiously across the plains, learning the rhythm of the seasons, reading the wind, tracking the giants. They studied the land shaped by glaciers and storms. They adapted. They endured. And unlike any creature before them, they imagined. Around controlled firelight, beneath skies still veiled with dust, early humans began to tell stories. They painted animals on cave walls. They crafted tools from stone and bone. They did not yet know it, but they were standing at the threshold of a transformation, far greater than the retreat of ice. For tens of thousands of years, mammoths and humans shared this fragile world. Hunter and hunted, observer and observed, two species bound together by the cold breath of the ice age. But the climate would change again. The ice would withdraw, the winds would soften, and when they did, not every giant would survive the turning of the age. The mammoths would fade into silence, humans would not. From a world shaped by ice, wind, and dust, a new chapter of Earth's story was about to begin. And this time, the architects of change would walk on 2 feet. And so, this world, shaped by ice, wind, and dust, reached its silent equilibrium. The footprints of giants were erased by the wind, and the continents were once again separated by water. All that remained were stories carved into stones and memories hidden deep within the earth. This world is gone, but every step taken upon it laid the foundation for the planet we live on today. And we still walk upon the legacy of that ancient world. Enjoy a peaceful night, and thank you for joining me on this quiet journey. Don't forget to subscribe for more, and good night.